Welcome to the Grit with Wisdom podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of not just mountain bikers, but mountain sports enthusiasts from all walks of life in order to discover the tools and the tactics that help us have more fun out in the mountains more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push the boundaries of the sports we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Today on the show, we have a very special guest and great friend of mine. Mike Wells isn't the typical diehard mountain biker that I usually sit down with. Mike is an endurance trail runner who has an incredible way of articulating his learnings and packaging them up into use for his other sports, which are mountain biking and rock climbing. Mike's primary focus over the last few years has been ultra endurance trail running, which I admit I knew very little about prior to this conversation. We talk about the incredible highs, the lows, and the sometimes strange places that his mind has taken him throughout his various failures, successes, and experiences out on the trail. Having just completed the Whistler Alpine Meadows, which is a mind-boggling 160 kilometer or 100-mile race with over 3,000 meters of elevation, which he completed over 38 hours straight. We break down what it took to get there and how many of his perceived failures in the past actually set him up perfectly to truly experience and relish the success of finishing this race. It's my hope that some of the topics discussed in this conversation are able to broaden your lens and help stimulate positive growth in your mental game, whatever the sport is that you use for a vehicle for personal growth and enjoyment. With no further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Mike Wells. Hey Mike, welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you on here.
Yeah, hey Jake, how you doing?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks. How's your morning been so far?
Mine has been good. Got out
Yeah.
for a little run, little 5K, just to try and loosen things up, get some nerves out of the system.
Yeah, fantastic, dude. It's funny, you're probably more nervous for this than you are for some of the crazy races we're about to talk about, right?
Yeah, this is certainly a new experience, something I haven't done before, so it's always exciting, and there's bound to be some nerves.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I think of those nerves as excitement, right? That's fantastic. Well, I'd like to start by telling people a little bit about you and what you're into. I know you're a multi-sport, multi-talented man, but I'd love to talk about your main sport here to start with, which is trail running. And I'd love to know, like, what initially drew you to long-distance trail running?
Trail running kind of came about, my wife and I were traveling on our honeymoon, and we were through some different countries in Europe, and it was really odd though. Like, we just kind of lined up. It happened to be marathon season, so we were in like Oslo and they were running the marathon, and then we're in Amsterdam and they were running the marathon, and we're in Warsaw and they were running a marathon, and we sort of were drinking the whole time, and of course usual sort of pub conversations being like, we should go for it. We should, in the next 12 months, let's run a marathon. And so it took me like from the couch to my first marathon about 6 months.
Wow.
And then we got introduced into the world of trail running with a local community in Kamloops.
Okay.
Like a little local trail series just welcomed us with open arms, and from that it was just done. It was sold. Like, getting out in the forest, it's a rad way to explore. We just have fun being out there.
Fantastic, man. I love that story. And
Yeah.
a relatively short transition from, sitting at the pub, traveling around Europe to becoming a marathon runner. So
Yeah.
great work, yeah.
Yeah, my wife Kat, she did the same. She did a marathon about 4 months after myself, but she was already into some trail running before that as well, and it was something we both liked. She comes from a hiking background, and I'm just a little too hyperactive for hiking. It just takes a little long to get places, so trail running was a bit of a natural fit.
Man, that's awesome. And how did you go? I'm curious, like, building up to a marathon seems like a massive goal for me as a relative non-runner. How did you go about building up to that in that 6 months?
It was interesting. I ran 3 days a week, so 2 shorter days and then a long day. and it just every long day just trying to push it a little bit further. But it was this huge, like every time I went for a long run and got a little further, like the crack of the door of possibility kind of just opened a little bit more. I knew I wanted to, but like everyone, like I started off being like 2K, and that was savagely tough. And it was so hard, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to make a marathon. But little by little, you just kind of chip away at it. And then once you get to about 30K, after that, it's kind of mental. So during training, you don't really run much further than 30. I think my longest run was like 34K before going for the full 42. So, wow. And then it was just even finishing that, you're like, I can't do it. There's no way I can find like 10 more kilometers. Like that's so far. Like, but somehow on the day, you just find a way to keep going. Nice crowd, people energizing you, and you're like, rad.
Yeah, fantastic. And did you find that transition there into trail running from road running really helped you start increasing your distance and getting stoked on it?
You get really humbled nice and quickly. Like when you look at elevation gain, like you look at a course profile or something, it's like, cool, you're going to do like 20K, which I could do relatively comfortable. And they're like, yeah, and it's got like 500 meters of elevation gain. So you think about it, you're like, okay, 500 meters, that's not so bad. And then when you actually put your feet down on it, it humbles you pretty quickly. You're like, cool, I can't run this steep hill. I get to walk. And it's just these like built-in little breaks. And so it's just rad. You get to do so much walking. And like the longer you go, the more walking you do, and you can justify it super easily.
That's funny, isn't it, for someone that didn't like hiking initially?
Yeah.
You're like, great, I get to go hiking.
yeah. But you get to run flats and downs. It's super fun.
Yeah, it's a fantastic mix, isn't it? Kind of, not just physical rest when you're maybe walking up the hill instead of running, but also maybe a mental rest as well.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to eat some food, kind of take in the scenery a little more, and just take that moment to appreciate where you are in the world.
That's fantastic, man. Fantastic. And I know we're here mainly to talk about the mental side of your running and the big runs today, but I wanted to just touch on at the start here, some of the other sports that you're part of. This podcast, as you know, is predominantly mountain biking focused.
Yeah.
And that's why I invited you on today. I know you're a mountain biker as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your mountain biking and, some of the differences, some of the different things you take out of each sport that you do.
I would say I grew up a BMX rider, and that's where a huge amount of passion was and still really is for bikes. I was a part of that world for years and years and years. Sort of injuries took its toll, and I stopped progressing on the BMX at a certain age and kind of fell into the winter sports world of skiing, snowboarding, which drew me over to Canada. And then my first summer here, working at Endless, it was like, here's mountain bikes to use. And so I was like, this is rad. I'm just back into the bike world. It was so much fun. I didn't have a huge desire to push my own limits a lot in mountain biking. I really just wanted to cruise and really enjoy it. On the North Shore, it's tough to cruise and enjoy it, as you know. It's pretty full on. So I got relatively handy on a mountain bike, in quick succession, riding with Matt and all the Endless guys, all being instructors. It was pretty rad going for rides, essentially getting free lessons and tours from everyone. And I came into mountain biking with a different mindset of not needing to throw myself super hard into doing the hardest things ever. I sort of didn't start mountain biking until I was mid-20s, and it's sort of by that point the whole drive of, I find some people, is going pro or getting sponsored and stuff, and it's like by that age and my ability level, it's like, that's never going to happen. I just get to enjoy this and just appreciate where it can take you, the spots you can see. You would know, Matt's little favorite spot up on the 5th switchback or 6th switchback, where you get the cool view of the city after you pop out through the forest.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he takes everyone there, and it's just you get to appreciate, and you're like, I wouldn't see this if I wasn't mountain biking. And so that's kind of where I went with that, and then it was cool.
Yeah, it's an unreal outlook. It's so cool hearing someone come into the sport with just zero expectations, like, hey, I'm just going to enjoy the forest, not worried about going fast, going big, anything like that. But then it sounds like you got confident at mountain biking quite quickly as a result.
Yeah. The skills are semi-transferable from like the BMX. So the bike control was there. Just getting used to a bigger bike was certainly something different. I just couldn't throw it around or bunny hop it like I could, or any sort of tricks or anything like that. And but it kind of blew my mind of what I could just run over. Like I came into it with nothing but modern mountain bikes and high-end mountain bikes. I've only ridden high-end stuff. And so it's like, this is rad. I could just run over everything. All I've got to do is stay on top of the bike, which you can do once you've ridden for most of your life. You're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I can corner. And I was just getting some tweaks and helps from some guys who were like, oh, yeah, you got it. Just lean back and roll it. So you're like, okay, I can do that. I can stay on top. So
it's an awesome feeling, isn't it, when we finally kind of gain that trust in equipment, which is so much better, infinitely better than the bikes we grew up riding, back in the BMX days, or even as kids running around the streets there in Australia. Yeah, man, that's fantastic. And I know, you're rock climbing as well, you're doing some snowboarding, you're kind of into all these different mountain sports. I wanted to talk for a second here about, some different emotions we experience when we're doing those different mountain sports. I know we've had some really good conversations around like fear, doubt, hesitation, stuff like this.
Yeah.
How would you say running differs to mountain biking in the sense of fear and doubt?
I think you've just got a lot more time with running. So the fear it comes on in different ways than being scared of, say, a drop or a jump or a really hard line, or where getting into like the mountain bike or even back in the BMX, it's kind of like you've got the split second decision to kind of go for it and not backing out, being like, once you've kind of committed to it, you're fully committed to it. And after about 10, 15 seconds, that's kind of gone. Like, you've committed and you've done it. In the rock climbing world, it's kind of a bit of a different world, because you commit to this climb and you get to a certain point and you're like, oh, I kind of have to keep going up. Yeah. And so trail running's really similar, because they're such long distances, and you've kind of got to remind yourself of that commitment that you made to yourself at the start, where you're like, because it's not 10 seconds and it's over, or rock climbing where it might be, a 10-minute like climb if you're doing a really tough sort of bigger wall. Trail running, it's multiple hours. So you get these lows where you forget your commitment because you're tired and you're hungry and your legs hurt and you want to go home and all those things. So you've got a different commit to it. You get to go on a bit more of a journey, as kind of odd as it sounds. It really is a journey in itself to get to the finish, and reminding yourself that, yes, I committed to this, you can do it. And it doesn't matter if you've done it before or not done it before. It's like you've committed. Try and look after yourself and do whatever you can to get to the finish.
Yeah, that's an amazing insight, and it's mind-boggling for me to think about, because I'm part of all the same sports as but with different levels of focus in different sports. Mountain biking is my primary hobby, and like you say, mountain biking, we do experience fears a lot, quite often. They're over fast, whether we decide to walk around the feature or whether we decide to get it done. It's over in a matter of seconds, a matter of minutes, kind of worst case scenario. Rock climbing I find incredibly difficult, because I am forced to sit there with my fear and work through it. There's no going up and there's no going down unless I can control my bodily response and get myself back to a state where I can think clearly and do what I know I can do. But it just boggles my mind to think of you going out for a 100-kilometer run or something like that, and being like, if I'm halfway in between, it can almost be just as dangerous as being halfway up a crag on a rock climbing wall, or halfway down a really steep mountain biking run with no one to help you out.
Yeah, I think the fear isn't as intense in trail running, because it's sort of more prolonged. You don't kind of get that fight or flight response that you can have, that kind of, call it panic, if you will, on like a rock climbing wall, of kind of like you're cruising up and you're having a good time, and then you're kind of looking around, you're like, where did the handholds go? Where did the where am I going next? And then all of a sudden you're looking down and you're like, oh my God, I'm so high up. Oh man. And you kind of, it's, I think, yeah, one of the fun parts about rock climbing, you get to sit there with that emotion and kind of work through it. Trail running sort of similar, where you get to work through it, but I think it's almost easier to work through it because you're moving. And so you're continuing to move in a direction, and that direction is the finish. And so every time you like glance at your watch or whatever you might be doing for the long stuff, you're kind of seeing how far you've come while you're being like, I can't continue. You're like that same moment we get in rock climbing, but then you get like 3 moves up and you're like, oh man, I just did 3 moves from a spot where I thought I was completely stuck. I'm kind of invincible. I'm going to finish this climb. And it turns in a certain way in the ultra world, where you get to a certain point in a run and you'll start to ride a bit of a high, because you'll start to believe that you can do it. You'll be like, oh, I've gone 20 kilometers thinking I'm done, and now I've only got 10 or 15 more. So you're like, I can do it. I can get it done.
Totally, yeah, that action compounds.
Yeah.
Such a great and such an important realization, I think, for any of these mountain sports that we're into. And have you found some of those learnings that you've taken out from these big ultra marathons, these big long runs, have then come back and helped you when you get on a mountain bike or get on the rock climbing wall?
I think so. I think like a lot of it's transferable to rock climber. I have a big fear of heights, and so it's super funny. Like everyone's like, so you rock climb? It's like, yeah, just because it allows you to sit with that emotion and try and. My goal was to get rid of that fear of heights. It's still there, but I've just found ways to not necessarily push it to the side, but almost embrace that and work through it.
Yeah, work with it, right?
And on a mountain bike now, it's still just about fun. Like if I do a bit of a risk reward, and it's got to be pretty low risk for me now. Like I still enjoy riding, but it's pushing those boundaries doesn't give me the buzz. I'm not looking for that adrenaline hit anymore. I'm kind of just want to be out there, want to enjoy the sceneries, want to have some fun. It's probably why I don't ever ride alone. I enjoy the social aspect of it, but it's got to be with like-minded people. It's got to be with people who like a relaxed ride, who don't want to go out and push the boundaries or push it hard. Yes, if they're having a good day, go for it. Try something that you've been thinking about for a while, but it's pretty rare those days happen for me. I'm just like, I want to get out of it injury-free and on to the next day.
Totally, man. And just to clarify, that doesn't mean you don't ride hard things, right? That means you ride things that are within your comfort zone for your level, right?
Yeah, I just think that definitely back, like in the BMX days, like pushing it was what I got out of it. Pushing the limits of what I could do and things like that is what really kept me engaged in it. I think I've got my own outlet of pushing what I think I'm capable of through trail running, so it's kind of made these other sports just more relaxed. I've just been able to find the joy in them as opposed to needing to push to find the joy.
Totally. Yeah, I hear that a lot. Can relate there, kind of having like your main sport and then maybe like your side sports, so to speak. And it's like, I don't really care about those. I'm just there to have fun. This is the one that I want to push myself in.
Yeah. And it's not to say that I don't have fun trail running. I love it. It's a blast. I find it's a very safe way to prove to yourself that you can do some things that you didn't think were possible in a safe environment. Like I've had some injury issues running as well, but I've had a lot of concussions from BMX days and snowboard days and pushing those boundaries and things like that. And so for me, it's super fun just to be able to push myself in a new way and still challenge myself, but without this risk of issues later on in life.
Totally, I hear that, man. Yeah.
Sound like an old man now.
No, but it's a great outlook because, we still want to be doing this stuff when we are old, man.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, didn't care about it when I was 20. All of a sudden I do now.
Wait, I thought you were still 20. No, fantastic, man. Well, I'd love to dig in a little bit here to your racing, to kind of the background and then where you are now later on. I know we've chatted a lot about one race in particular that you did in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about Sinister 7? What is it?
Sinister 7 is a 100-mile race in Crow's Nest, Alberta, which is just over the BC border. It's dubbed as like a really, really tough 100-miler, but also in BC, there isn't a lot of 100-mile races. And so I decided at some point that I was going to go for it. I like to think I was early on, young and cocky in my early running career. And so I pegged it out from about 18 months, I think. And so I put my heart and soul into this race, if you will. And with that, like, for example, I had the course map constantly on a tab on my phone. I knew it inside and out. I'd watched every YouTube video that you could find on it. The year before the race, I actually got out to Crow's Nest and got on parts of the course and did the toughest leg of the course. So I knew what I was in store for. Like, I thought I was ready. Like, and in hindsight, like, my legs and my body were. Like, I was fully prepared to the best of my ability, and on race day, some things just don't happen.
Right. Just to stop you there, to prepare for a 100-mile, this is like 161 odd kilometers, right?
Yeah.
In the Alpine, how much elevation?
That one had 6,400 meters of elevation.
6,400 meters of elevation, all on your feet. Okay, so you felt like you're at a stage where you prepared well enough, you're ready to run this mind-boggling distance for me as a mountain biker.
Yeah.
And that elevation as well. And yeah, like, tell us about race day.
So race day came. There wasn't much anxiety. There wasn't much nerves leading into it. I felt really good. Like, I battled through. So the race was in July, and I battled through a knee injury from sort of October through to, I want to say, January was when it finally got sorted. I saw a number of different people to try and figure out what it was. We went down one path that ended up not being the correct sort of diagnosis, and so went to a different physio, and I thank that physio every day. He kind of got to a point after about 4 weeks, and he's like, man, I don't know what it is. He's like, I thought it was this, but it's not. He's like, I know this other guy who's really good, go see him. And so going to see another physio, he was like, yeah, man, like, well, we can rule out that because it would have healed by now. And so he went in with a different sort of idea, and within, I want to say, sort of a month, I was back to being able to run like 2 and 3 kilometers pain-free, with sort of 6 months or 4 months ahead being like, cool, now I've just got to add like 158 and I'm good. Like, yeah. So I just kept like really focused on my rehab, really focused on just trying to get ready for my body, as ready as I could be for it. Mentally, I thought I was good to go.
Did it play into your mind at all, the fact that you were only running 2 and 3 kilometers and you're like, I'm 6 weeks out from this thing? Did that play into your mind at all, or were you just so focused on what you had to do to get?
By about 6 weeks, I was back to sort of regular training. So okay. I was still kind of being very cautious of my knee, but I was back to being like pain-free running, being able to put on like big weeks. I got in about 300 or 400 kilometer weeks of training sort of leading up to the race. So yeah, I felt really good and really ready. Got like a decent night of sleep before the actual race, and showed up to the start line ready to rock. Had my plan, had everything going on. You know, you've watched the videos. You're like, I'm ready.
Yeah, man, it's awesome, man. Talk to us about that plan. Do you include, you know, are you doing any kind of mental warm-ups, any kind of pump-up routine or anything? Like, what are you doing before the race?
This one, back then I didn't really have much of a routine. Like, I kind of just tried to get some food in because, you know, you're pretty excited and you're pretty nervous. On the drive, we had about a 20-minute drive, just put on some good, like, pump-up tunes, and it's kind of a bit of a weird start, I guess, at 100-milers, because you think, gun, bang, and everyone's going. It's kind of like, gun, bang, and everyone sort of shuffles off at a pretty chill pace. So it was a really cool experience, like to be standing on the start line. It was sort of, while COVID was still sort of around, but they managed to piece this event together. But now my routines are a little different. It's forcing myself to eat. I usually get on like the foam roller a little bit to try and just loosen up the muscles and just try and get to the start line a little bit early and have a bit of a walk around and try and soak in wherever you are, because that's one of the cool things about trail races. You're always starting in a beautiful part of the world. So the most recent one I did, I took some photos and really just tried to enjoy it. Walked around with my wife Kat and just chatted about life, like kind of treated it like it was a normal day. Tried not to think about how far you've got to go. Definitely with Sinister 7, like we were talking race strategy and race plan and how I'm going to get through the aid stations as fast as possible. It's like, cool, like we had everything set up of like what I might need, and it was, because it was my first one, I didn't really know exactly. So we had like 50 pierogies and a bunch of other stuff, and I'm going to come in, I'm going to need this, we're going to get that and this. And so that's kind of, I don't want to say a bit of the undoing, but that was definitely not what I needed to do to finish that race, which allowed me to learn a lot from it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It sounds like, you've got some really kind of hard-learnt wisdom. Now coming out of that, I've seen that at the start kind of really outcome focused. What do I need to do to win, to finish, that kind of thing?
Yeah,
so focused on that outcome, whereas now it's almost like you're not thinking about the outcome at all. You're just, practicing some presence, you're doing some movement before the race, and just being really, really grateful for where you are in the world.
Yeah, on that one I had like splits in my head. I knew what pace I had to run to get this particular time, and if I could get that time I could potentially come top 3. And I was really sort of not necessarily results driven. I was very focused on time, and I thought that I could do quite well even though it was my first. And I had a lot of confidence and a lot of belief in my abilities. I still do, but there was this particular sort of day, it was really, really hot. The course is really, really exposed. I wasn't used to running in the heat, and when you run in the heat or do any activity in the heat, as a lot of people know, your nutrition and your hydration is such a balancing act at the best of times. So you add in the heat, it's kind of on a knife's edge. As we sort of chat about one day at work, the finish rate of this race of Sinister 7 is usually about 30 or 40% of people finish, and the year I did it, it was 18% finished.
Oh, wow. That's madness, isn't it? So,
yeah.
Hundreds of people sign up for this race. They've trained, they've been running hundreds of kilometers.
Yeah.
To get there, and only 18% of people actually finish, let alone get a time they're maybe, chuffed with or happy with.
Yeah.
It's an amazing undertaking to go after, knowing that, isn't it? Knowing that, like, the chances are I will fail.
Yeah. There's a huge pot, like, even in a normal year, it's like, you look at it, like 60 or 70% chance that I'm not going to finish this race. Like, if someone, told you to get on a plane and they're like, yeah, there's a 60 or 70% chance you're not going to make it to your destination, you'd turn around and walk out. Like, you're not taking that risk.
In a mountain bike race, if there's a 60% chance that we're not going to finish it, like, it's madness. Most people finish a mountain bike race, there might be 1 or 2 DNFs.
Yeah.
But people are worried so much about getting a good time or being in the top 25%, let alone not finishing at all. So I can't imagine how that plays into your mental state out there on the day.
Yeah, I honestly, leading into that one, I did not even think about it. I didn't think there was a chance that I would fail. I thought I was so prepared and so ready that nothing could go wrong. I never have an issue with nutrition, never had an issue with hydration. I've never spewed during an event leading up to that, and I was ready. Like, there was one night I ran through the night to kind of get prepared for it. Like, I thought I had done absolutely everything I possibly could do to finish. And I was like, I'm not going to not finish. Like, I can't see a scenario where I won't finish leading into it. So when I didn't finish, it was a huge mental shock. It sent me into a very negative headspace for a number of weeks, where it was just, I replayed every single thing I could have done differently. And so I put so much of my self-worth into that race. I was like, I'm going to finish. Everyone knew I was running it. I was like, I'm going to finish. I'm going to be a 100-mile runner. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to tell amazing stories. all the things you think about of success and that leading into it, and then to not finish, it was just crushing.
Dude, yeah, I bet that was just heartbreaking, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound to me like you didn't prepare well. You prepared, you know, exceptionally well for everything that could go right. But it sounds like, you know, the one thing that, you know, you hadn't had experience with before was a failure on this level, or
Yeah.
call it whatever you want, but like not finishing. And man, that must have been tough.
Yeah, everything leading up to that race, I had exceeded expectations. Like, I had done a bunch of races. I had done well at them. I was hitting like all these time goals that I was setting for myself. Like, I just didn't have any failures. Oh, don't even call them failures. I just was always just exceeding my own expectations, which was amazing for a while. And it's often what happens when you're new into a sport. Your progression rate is so quick. Like, you go from running 1 kilometers to 10 kilometers in the space of a few weeks, but then every step after that just takes a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And so I was seeing nothing but success, and I was like, this is just going to keep the train rolling. And then to have to drop out of a race due to sort of dehydration and not being able to eat anything for 60 odd kilometers was kind of rough.
Yeah, absolutely, I bet. And it's crazy, you know, we see it in mountain biking as well. People, you know, coming into the sport, progressing so quickly, they're going bigger, they're going faster, they're going bigger, they're going faster. Sometimes if we don't stop to check ourselves, we can go too big, too fast, too soon. And that's where in mountain biking we may experience, you know, a physical injury, a mental block, something like this.
Yeah.
That does kind of slow us down and make us think a little bit more about, you know, a progressive approach.
Yeah, I think one of the tough things, and this was a really interesting learning experience for myself, was I've always been in a sport where if I failed at it, I might not even let the day go by without succeeding at it. So like in the BMX world, in the mountain bike world, in the rock climbing world, it's like, excellent, I can get back on this and I can try again straight away, or the next day, or the next week. Like with rock climbers, like, yeah, man, you can project a climb and you're like, oh, that was a really long project. I've been projecting it for 3 weeks. Like, yes. Whereas this was like, cool, I failed and I wanted to do it again, but you don't get to run another 100-miler in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or even 6 months. Usually you're not getting another attempt at, if you want to call it redemption, for a year. And so you get to sit with those, again, just sit with those thoughts and sit with those feelings for an extended period of time.
Totally. And, you know, in the weeks and months after this race, after this experience, how did you find your outlook changing? As you mentioned, you know, a lot of yourself was tied up in being the guy that could complete this race. How did you kind of, process those thoughts around that?
I think I just got to sit with them for a while, and once I actually, like, I didn't want to run anymore. Once I dropped out, I was like, man, I don't want to fail again. And so that fear definitely creeps in of failure.
So much so that you're looking at, like, talking about giving up the sport that you love so much.
Yeah, and once I got back out on trail and just back out in the forest and could feel like myself again, that's my time to work through those feelings of being able to think about different things while moving. Definitely helps. Like, if it's just a stroll or whatever it is, but if you can go for a walk while you're trying to process some emotions or something, I find it so much nicer.
Totally.
And so yeah, it was tough to get over that hurdle, and really I was certainly looking ahead of what could I do next? Where's the next race? I want to sign up for another one. Like, where's the next 100? Where, like, I need redemption. And it was super nice that I didn't get that, and it gave me a chance to really process those feelings, really find out that no one cared that I dropped out. Everyone was super impressed that I did 93 kilometers and 60 of those were without eating or drinking. Like, I ran my body into the ground. Like, I nearly ended up on an IV, like, at the end of that race. Like, there were so many things I couldn't do. Like, I'm an asthmatic and I couldn't take my puffer because I couldn't breathe in deep enough, because as soon as I breathed in deep, my back would cramp because I had no fluids left. There was
It is just nuts, isn't it?
yeah.
Like,
So
once we get out of our own heads and really see the situation for what it is, it's like, wow.
yeah,
Like that is such an impressive feat in itself. It doesn't matter that you didn't get to the finish line.
yeah,
And I know, I'm seeing kind of a key theme here of movement, allowing physical movement to help you work through some emotions and some feelings as well, whether it be on the foam roller or, strolling through the forest. I'm a big believer in that as well, whether it be on the bike or even just dealing with some tough stuff in life in general. I find movement is the best way to help emotions move through your body as well.
definitely. For me, I've chatted to some people about it. I'm like, and they're like, oh man, I can't believe you went for a run like 5 days after you ran 160 kilometers. I'm like, for me, that's my body check that you do with meditation. I kind of struggle a little bit with meditation. Just the no movement is tough. Like, I like to move.
Yeah.
And so going for a very gentle, easy run allows me to really check in and see how things are doing in my body, like physically and a bit of mentally. Like, you can kind of escape a little bit and go, yeah, how you feeling? Yeah, you're feeling good? Yeah. And you can kind of talk to yourself a little bit, being like, yeah, the legs are feeling okay. They're feeling tight or whatever it might be. It gives me a chance to check in with myself while the rest of the world revolves around.
Totally, man. Yeah, it's so great. I love that idea, and I know we'll chat in there a little bit about some other techniques you've got to help process emotions when you're feeling like a high emotional load. We'll talk in a little bit about, we'll call it journaling, but the practice of writing down your thoughts, whether it be digitally in like a draft email or on a bit of paper. But can you talk us through a little bit about how you've used that process in the past?
Yeah, so I'm pretty new to it. It's not something I've really ever done in the past, but I just call them trail thoughts, if you will. There's lots of sort of thoughts that you get out on trail or just spending some time, alone time out on a stroll, whatever it might be. And so I've probably got about 6 or 7 drafts, all of different topics in my drafts box on my email, where I just sit down and I just type a little bit about not even really what's going on, but just some different thoughts that I've had, some different ideas, none of them multi-million-dollar ideas, but just ways that life can be improved and things like that. A lot of them have a particular topic. So I suffer from like anxiety, and I've suffered from depression a lot. And so there's a topic about that, about how that plays in with my mind and different things, and how reframing feeling unlucky that I've had those things happen to me, to being like, I'm lucky, because it gives me some like context. It gives me something where it's like, cool, things have been really low, so the highs feel really good. If you're high all the time, you're never gonna know how good it really is until you've been through a bit of a low. So going through those lows just mentally remind me that when the good times are good, they're real good. And so changing that from being unlucky to lucky. So if you kind of want to put it in a bit of a mountain bike perspective, it's like you don't realize how nice it is to go down espresso without dropping a foot and hitting every feature, unless you've had to work to get to those features, unless you've had some lows during that journey to get to being able to do that. It's rock climbing. If you flash a climb, you don't realize how fun the climb is, and unless you've had to work for it a little bit, like that kind of reminds you of how good it can be.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a great realization there that we can't have these highs without having the lows, or we won't fully experience the highs in the deepest possible level without having first experienced the lows.
Yeah. So that was my mum that sort of reminds me of that. She's also had some mental health things, the same as myself. So it's like we chat about it very openly, about our anxiety and things like that. And she's like, we're lucky we get to experience those lows, because it means the highs are just awesome.
That's so fantastic, man, and so great you have your mum there to chat to about this stuff. as well, which sounds
Yeah.
like such a great guide and such a great mentor, having experienced, some of these battles herself. And I love that idea of reframing it, because we all have our battles when we look at it.
Yeah.
We all have our different things we're struggling with. But it's so great when we can see the light at the end of the tunnel and be like, hey, even if I'm feeling low right now, whether it be in our sport or just in life in general, we know that there's the highs are coming, or the good times are coming.
That's definitely something like the endurance world has taught me to really appreciate. It's like you'll go through highs and lows, and they may be varying of how low they're going to be and how high they're going to be. Like it's part of just, I call it the roller coaster when I'm out there. And so people ask like, "Oh, how you doing?" And I'll just be like, "Oh yeah, man, just riding the roller coaster."
Yeah.
And most of them will understand and be like, "Oh yeah, it's that time of the race." So it's a cool community.
Yeah, totally. It's so cool for you being out there with hundreds of other people all going through the same things.
Yeah.
There on the trail in the mountains. I'd love to talk here a little bit about the most recent race you completed. Another 100-miler here in the Coast Mountains, Whistler, BC. It's called the Whistler Alpine Meadows, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this is a Gary Robbins race for any trail runners out there. And it's a tough one, isn't it? I chatted to you a lot at work there about, your mindset and your physical state leading into the race. But maybe you can talk a little bit on that. Like, what were you like leading into this one?
Yeah, let's start with Gary Robbins. Thank you for putting on these events. They're amazing. Whistler Alpine Meadows, or WAM, is 100 and my watch said 163k, so cheers for the extra k's. And it's 9,050 meters of elevation gain, and it's just I don't know. It was a super odd thing because I kind of signed up for it because we're living here in North Van, and so it was close, it was convenient. I might not get another chance if we're living somewhere else, and it's tougher than Sinister, with more elevation. So it's like, cool, I missed out on Sinister, so let's pick something tougher. It's kind of an odd thing to do for most people, but leading into it, my knee issues decided to return the summer. So I did, I think, like a 47 or 48k race about 6 weeks out. And then after that, it really took its toll on my knee. And I think the longest run I did, which should have been like my peak mileage weeks leading into it, were like 12 and 16 kilometers when they should have been 30s and 40s. So it was mentally tough. I really focused on trying to get my knee the best it could. I knew that whatever mileage, like especially like 4 weeks out, whatever mileage you put in, it's not going to help you on race day. Like whatever I was going into, like my base level, that's what I was going into WAM with. And
right, so by that stage you're saying like the training's already done, you go into more of a maintenance stage before the race?
Yeah, just trying to do whatever I can to get my knee the best I could. I wasn't going to, especially like a couple of weeks out, being able to run 20 or 30 Ks would just do damage to my knee. So there was no point putting on kilometers for the sake of putting on kilometers. I was going to go in with what I had, try and get my knee the best I could. And so I really switched my focus to my mental state, which was sort of something new. Thanks. Sort of something new to me to focus on. I always thought my mental game was pretty good heading in, but this was something totally new. It was not physically ready for it. And so I was like, if I can be mentally ready for it, I'm in with half a battle.
It's a super interesting turnaround, isn't it? Because talking about your last race, you're like, physically, I was 100%, I'd done all the training, I was strong, I was ready. Mentally, you hadn't really considered what would happen if you failed. Whereas this time, we've almost got the opposite dynamic, right?
Yeah, so it was a cool learning experience, like another opportunity to grow and continue to experience something new. I would say I felt really mentally ready. I had a bit of a mantra of, if I can walk, I will continue to move. Like as long as I could move forward, I wouldn't drop from the race.
Right. And this was a huge point, wasn't it? I know you kind of made that promise to yourself.
Yeah.
And it may have seemed like a tiny little promise at the time, like if I can walk, I'm going to walk.
Yeah, there was a lot of the times during this race where I wished I couldn't walk so that I could get in a car and go home.
Yeah, so let's talk now about the race. Like how did we go as you started running and during that day?
So as my anxiety was just through the roof, like leading into it, like I struggled to get down breakfast. I always try and pick something like super tasty so that at least it's food. So it's like morning off was like choc chip waffles with Nutella on it. Like who wouldn't want that? It's delicious.
Yeah.
And so I managed to get some food in. Got to the start line nice and early, which was good. By the time the sort of race was kicking off, I was feeling a little more relaxed. And once I started running again, just feeling a little more relaxed. And it wasn't until we sort of did the first big climb and big descent, and I got to the first crew point where my wife was waiting, and I sort of looked at her, and we're 30 Ks in, so there's still 130 K to go. I'm like, this is tough. Like my legs, I could really feel that my legs hadn't been running much. Like they hadn't been doing elevation gain or descent. And I was like, oh, I can. And so that's when sort of the first seed of doubt creeps in where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to have this. And so, yeah, I really started to doubt whether I was going to be able to finish just because I was like, my legs aren't what they need to be. And so I was like, all right, off I go on the next one. And the next climb was 1,700 meters over 20 kilometers, and it was nothing but climbing up to the top of Whistler there. And so it sucked the kind of life out of me there. Got up the top, had some stomach issues sort of on the way up there, and did a bit of a power burp at the aid station, and all those memories from Sinister started coming back where I had nausea, and that's what took me out of the race. And I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm time to pack it in and go home. And I was 50K in, and couldn't really drop at the top of a mountain, so it was kind of like I had to make my way back down the mountain. And sort of the next real access point to call it quits and hand over your bib and get in the car was at 65 kilometers where my wife would be again.
Right. So for those that aren't trail runners or racers, the way it works is, these guys are running and girls are running through the middle of nowhere. You're up on alpine passes. You can't just decide to give up and get in the car and get home at a lot of points, can you?
Yeah.
You have to keep walking or keep running until you get to the next aid station at an access road where you're able to get out.
Yeah. So
and even then, you probably have to walk out from there, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty intense place to be when you're out there like, I don't think I can finish this.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of doubt, a lot of sort of stomach issues, and you just battle. And you're battling with yourself, and it's tiring. Like, not only you're battling with the fatigue in your legs, you're battling your own mental self, you're battling your stomach to try and keep food in so that you can keep moving, and the food also gives you a mental boost. So I was consuming like the absolute bare minimum amount of calories that I needed to keep moving, which is always going to put you in a negative headspace. And so I got to see Kat at 65K, and that was just as the sun set. So I've sort of been going for 12 hours sort of thing, and I was ahead of schedule, which was sort of surprising because I didn't think I was moving that well. And I was like, I'm going to take this half an hour that I've kind of, the gap I've built myself on some projected times. And I was like, I'm going to take this time. I'm going to try and just take a breath and breathe in and relax, get some food in, try and get this stomach to settle, and had a little bit of a cry and all the fun stuff that happens when you're just exhausted and you're done and you want to go home. And Kat sort of, she's a rock. She's like part of the reason I kept going for so long. She was the reminder that you can still walk, you can still go. Right. And it's like, I wish I couldn't walk. And it's mentally tough because, you've done 65K, you've been moving for 12 hours, you're about to head into 10 hours of darkness with a headlamp and nothing else. And you're like, this sucks.
Oh my God, man. I can't imagine moving for 12 hours straight. And then thinking about going into darkness with your headlamp out there on the trails, sometimes completely alone when there's no other runners with you. after being in such a low place. It takes some courage, man, to move forward past that point and live up to that promise you made yourself at the start.
So yeah, got up out of the chair and just marched on down the trail. Got a little bit of a jog on it. It's odd in these long distance events. You do so much walking and hiking that when you actually run, you feel good because you're actually running. You feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do. When you're walking, it can be really tough because you're like, I should be able to run this, or whatever it might be. You kind of get
again that kind of self-talk seeping in.
Yeah, and
when in reality, walking's just what you should be doing if that's what your body needs or that's what the terrain demands, right?
Yeah, and so I knew going in that I needed to walk a lot to save my knee and to do whatever I could do to get to the finish. So it was an experience at that point. Going through the night, I saw some people who were in worse states than myself and saw them kind of dust themselves off and continue to move. I was like, all right, they're doing it tougher than I am. I've got nothing to complain about. And I think that was kind of a bit of a mental switch almost in a way. I kind of helped a lady she was having a real tough go at it. She was sort of spewing on the side of the trail in the middle of the night. I was like, hey, instead of just walking past her, I kind of stopped and waited and made sure she was okay. And we spent some kilometers together, and instead of chatting about the misery we were going through with the stomach issues and the tough trail and the nighttime, we started talking about fun things like our pets, and that was rad. It just kind of took us out of our little misery bubble for a bit, and we got to share some miles together. And then she ended up stopping for a long time at the aid station to really try and take care of herself and do what she needed to do. And I spent whatever time I needed and then kind of got out there and just kept moving. But then it was wild. As the sun came up the next day, like I wasn't basking in sunlight. It wasn't like one of those glorious scenes from a movie where the sun comes up and it's shining on me. It was just like, cool, it's getting brighter. I don't need my headlamp anymore. I can actually see the surroundings and see nature, and it reminds you of kind of where you are. And I just had this burst of enthusiasm because all of a sudden I didn't have 100 kilometers to go. I looked at my watch and I'm like, I've got 65 kilometers to go.
Yeah, you're over the hurdle, over halfway.
Yeah, and you're like, I can do this. Holy moly, I'm going to do this. And this belief just seeps into your body and just infects everything. Like I got back to the aid station or the crew point where my wife was at 103 kilometers, and it had been 24 hours and I hadn't slept, and I was full of energy. I was eating, I was laughing. I invented the all dressed chips 2-bite brownie sandwich. Like it was everything I'd hoped the first day would be, with just like love and enthusiasm. And I kind of rode that high. We chatted at work one day about me not trying to contain the high that I feel sometimes while running, so the lows don't feel bad. But after being awake for 24 hours, you kind of don't have a huge amount of control over your emotions. So you just, whatever you're feeling, you just let yourself feel that. You don't have the energy to fight it anymore.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, without that energy to fight it, your emotions are allowed to flow naturally.
Yeah.
Like we so often want them to be able to do. It's like it took 24 hours of running to almost like get out of your own way and just experience.
To break down that wall. And so I was looking at it, I'm like, cool, I still had 2 massive climbs. Like I still had to climb up Whistler, descend Whistler, climb up Blackcomb and descend Blackcomb. So I still had, like 3,500 meters of climbing and 60 odd kilometers to go. But I believed, and I think that was one of the first times I believed that I was going to finish, because I was still moving relatively well. I was still hiking well. My feet were in relatively good shape considering. My legs were in relatively good shape considering. And I was able to eat. My stomach felt settled.
Right. And do you think that kind of mental stability or that belief, that positivity played into the fact that your body started accepting food again?
I think so. I think it was like, oh, cool. It's a new day. I don't know necessarily exactly what it was, and if I could find a way to bottle it and keep it, It'd be amazing. But yeah, so the next few kilometers or the next few hours, if you want to call it that, went really smooth. Wasn't till about hour 32 that I started some interesting hallucinations of different things on trail becoming different shapes, like pine cones up on trail, like about 10 meters ahead, look like a bunch of baby ducks, and just little things like that just shapes turn into other shapes, the same as when you look at a cloud for long enough.
Yeah, you've been awake for so long, you're so physically exhausted.
Yeah.
You start hallucinating on the trail.
Yeah, not interacting with these hallucinations, but just making things like rocks looked like frogs or things like that. Like I said, same as you can look at a cloud and make it into a dragon, I could look at a tree stump and all of a sudden it was like an eagle being grabbed by the bottom, like by its talons with a serpent sort of thing. It was really, it was cool. But I kind of focused on that a bit too much, which sort of led me to not trusting my brain, which again kind of put me in a bit of a mental state that I'd never got to before. And so I had 23 kilometers to go, which was fine. Like for an ultra runner, you're looking like 23 kilometers to go, finished in the bag, got it covered. But I'd been awake for 33 hours and I was not trusting my brain, and
it was to the point, right, that you were taking photos of, like, I know you showed me a photo of a rabbit and you were like, I wasn't sure if this was a rabbit or not, I had to prove it.
Yeah, there was a rabbit on the trail up ahead of me and I'd seen enough things to know that it could just be a rock, and so I took a photo to kind of prove to people that I'm not crazy and that rocks can look like rabbits. Because I definitely thought it was just going to be another rock, and I got close and it was this just adorable little bunny rabbit.
It actually was a bunny rabbit.
Right.
So in this state where you're feeling like you're not trusting yourself because of these visions, how did that play into your ability to trust yourself to finish the race?
That was my big thing at that particular crew point, like trying to get some food in, as well as trying to remember really basic things like sunscreen, charge my phone, I need to grab this for this portion of the trail, and trying to remember those things is when having Kat there was amazing, because I would think about them, and as soon as I saw her, I would just spout these things that I needed, and she always remembered them, which was super nice. But I remember at this particular one, I was scared. I've never been scared before, but I was scared because I didn't know what the next 6 hours were going to look like, because that's about how long that 23K would take me. And 23K, you're like, I can do that 6 hours. I don't know if I can do 6 hours.
So do you mean in the sense of the terrain that's ahead, or in terms of like your state physically, mentally?
My state mentally. Physically, I knew I could do it, but I was scared that I would potentially drift off trail. I would get lost. I'd be like all these different things in that thing of just not trusting myself and not knowing what was going to happen, to be awake for close to 40 hours. Like, I had no idea what that looked like in my own mind. And so it was very much like I contemplated taking a nap, but I don't usually take naps. So Kat was like, no, it's not a good idea. And so I kind of just started moving, and once I started moving again, those fears kind of went away, and I put in headphones, and there was a guy with me for a little bit, and I apologized to him because I kind of dropped him on trail. I was moving relatively quickly and climbing really strongly, and I didn't really wait for him because in my mind I had to get to work. Like, this was like headphones in, head down, please don't interrupt me. I'm going to the cave and I'm digging, like I'm working, and it was an odd feeling for me. I describe it to people like when you're at work and you're trying to get something done and someone keeps talking to you and you're like, I need to get this done.
Yeah.
And so that was my mindset of like, I just need to get this done. I need to get this climb done. I need to get to the top of this mountain. I can't have any distractions, if you will. and it was like a hyper focus that I've not really experienced, but just really ignoring the distractions of bunny rabbits and baby ducks that are pine cones, and really not focusing on the peripheral visions that I was having and looking up trail too far ahead. I was really focused on the next step, the next step, the next step.
Wow.
And so that was a really cool, unique experience, and just continuing to believe and trying to mentally focus that each step, believe a little bit more, believe a little bit more, believe a little bit more.
Totally. I love that. And I've heard this from, lots of different people that, that technique of instead of focusing too far up the trail, if you will, or too far out in the future, focusing on that next step that's right in front of you. What's the one skill I need to work on right now? And I love your point there of that constant, believe in yourself every step, that constant kind of reinforcement of I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. I find it works so well in mountain biking as well, as stupid as it sounds, to just tell yourself, I can do this every corner or between every feature.
Yeah.
Before you know it, we've done it.
Yeah, believing in yourself, and the techniques you've learned. I've always been drawn to sports where there is no training, call it if you want to call it that. There's no practice for mountain biking, really. You get better by riding and making sure that your technique's solid. Yes, there's definitely lessons, but you're not going to sort of weekly 2-hour soccer practice or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not as structured, is it?
No.
I definitely think a lot of us could benefit, myself included, from a little more structure into our practice. But it's not going to soccer training, having your coach there for 2 hours every week and your teammates and whatnot.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. In the mountain bike world, people will get maybe a lesson at the start of the season, maybe a lesson at the end while everything's fresh and while they know what they need to work on. And then they just spend time on trail, honing those techniques, which is super nice. I say to people that I don't do training runs. I just go for runs. It's super rad.
And is that a mental shift that you do for a reason? Or?
Yeah, and for a long time I still really don't call them races. I call them events.
Right.
Because I'm not really racing against anyone. I'm trying to have my best day. I think that's one of the most amazing things about these events is no one's wishing anyone to have a bad day. Everyone just hopes that everyone has the best day and does the best that they can. And that really starts to, well, for me especially, it's seeped into my everyday life where I wish the world was like that. No one was cutting anyone down. It's we all just build each other up, and I think that's a really cool thing that the ultra world has done really well, where it doesn't matter if you're first or 7,000th. It's everyone is out there to support you. No one has anything bad to say about you. And it's just this beautiful environment of building each other up. No one says anything negative to anyone about how they're doing. It's just this fantastic environment that allows people to go beyond what they think they could. And so I think if the world was sort of like that a little bit more, we'd be a lot further ahead than what we are if we all just builded each other up instead of I know the tall poppy syndrome in Australia is pretty strong, where if you rise up too quickly, there's a bunch of people trying to cut you back down to their level. I find it a little less around here in Canada, I think, or in North Van and Vancouver in particular. It's because it's such a big outdoor community. There's a lot of support about what everyone does.
We are lucky here, surrounded by a lot of like-minded people, whether they be climbers, mountain bikers, trail runners, snowboarders, or the like. And I love that reframe there of hey, we're all just going to this event to enjoy it, to have some fun, to collaborate together as trail runners. Sure, some people win, some people do well, but no one's necessarily worried about I'm faster than you, I'm slower than you, this comparison. Yeah. So I think that's something we mountain bikers can definitely take out of that, is removing some of the self-comparison and just doing it for the love of doing it. Yeah,
I am a big believer in trying not to compare anything to anyone else. We're all so different and so unique. no one has the same experience that you have. Like, you may look at it on paper and be like, oh, we grew up in a similar area, we're the same age, we've been riding for the same amount of time. Why can he do this, but I can't do this? It's and not necessarily like some people will wish a little negatively on the other person, being like, oh, I wish they weren't so good because it makes me look bad. It's definitely trying to get out of that mindset and think really positive and being proud of what you can do and really embracing your own journey. As we've sort of talked about before at work, it's people who can ride black trails on the North Shore. It's incredible. Yeah. Like, we were talking
people who can ride blue trails. It's incredible.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Yeah,
and being that and celebrating those achievements. Like, there's people out there who can't ride a bike.
Yeah,
and it's the same in the running world. There's people who can't run a lap of a track, so can't run 400 meters, and people scoff and laugh at someone who's trying to run a 5K. It's like that's still incredible. Like, anything you do is incredible.
I think we were talking there about the tendency for ourselves to be harsh on ourselves, especially when we're, say, swimming in a pool full of high performing people. Like we are here living in the Coast Mountains. Everyone seems to be like a low-key mountain bike racer or a free climber or something crazy like this. They're like, oh man, I'm just running black trails, I'm really not that good. But it's like, no, if we look at the bigger picture, that's amazing.
Yeah, we're definitely unfair on ourselves, because once we get into these sports, whatever sport they might be, you surround yourself with like-minded people. Like, I knew 2 people in my life who had run a marathon before I started running, and now I know a bunch of people who have run 100 kilometers, 100 milers.
Right.
And it's like, I look at my circle, or like the circle that's sort of around you, and you're like, oh, I didn't do anything special because a bunch of people can do that. But then you look at the broader picture of like, wow, like, it's special.
Yeah, totally.
And embracing that and really celebrating it.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's like the more into a sport you get, or the better you get, the more people you meet that are doing better, and it's so hard not to fall into that trap of self-comparison.
Yeah.
Whereas, we know at the end of the day, the only comparison that really matters is against ourselves.
Definitely.
Am I doing what I want to do? Am I performing at the level I want to perform? Am I finding happiness through this pursuit?
And that's part of the reason I call them events, because I'm really only doing it to prove to myself. It's definitely something I've changed since I started running, and it's a conscious effort that I make consistently to remind myself. I love how we talk about this stuff, and it's really easy to talk about and seem like it, but it takes work to get to these mental states. It's not just like a light switch one day and I'm like, oh, this is how I view things now. It takes time, takes effort.
Yeah.
Like everything in life, it takes effort to change things that have been programmed into our minds. Like, I still compare myself to other people, and social media has made it even easier. Like, things like Strava, where you can be like, oh man, I'm not doing as big a mileage as this guy or what, but it's like, we're all so different from each other that what might work for him might not work for me, or this and that. We're just trying to...
And I think it's important, for us to celebrate our wins, regardless of how small they may feel to us.
Yeah.
It's important to celebrate your wins so that you build up that trust over the long term in yourself, and you can continue to do hard things or approach challenging goals in the future.
I think, like, for me, just showing up to the start of a race is a huge win, like, especially over the last sort of 12 months or so with the anxiety that I've been getting at the start of races. I'm like, just show up, just give yourself a chance. Definitely for Wham and the injury and the doubts I sort of had leading into that as well. I was like, I think I'm going to pull the pin because there's no way I'm going to finish. But just showing up and seeing what you can do, it's different. It's something that I think is a win.
Totally.
And people should celebrate showing up.
Just showing up. And I think, we're talking there about mental toughness or whatever you call it as a practice, as a long-term thing, something that doesn't just happen through the act of talking about it or thinking about it. But I think that showing up, in a sense, like those are your mental reps. That's the practice. You're building those neural pathways. You're showing up to race after race after race. Before long, that anxiety is going to start to shrink because you're like, hey, I'm Mike and I show up. You're no longer going to doubt yourself for showing up because you've showed up so many times before, right?
Yeah, it becomes easier to sort of show up. You can kind of anticipate those feelings. Like definitely for Wham, I was like, I knew I was going to be anxious. I knew it was going to be really bad, and I knew I was going to be really nervous. And I was like, I expected that. It still doesn't necessarily make it easier when you're going through it, but knowing that you can get through it because you've done it before.
Totally. And I think, a key point in there as well is that you're not setting yourself huge, unrealistic promises. You're not saying, I'm going to go there and I'm going to run it in this time, or I'm going to go there and I'm going to finish it. You're saying, I'm going to show up. That's it. So setting yourself something really easy, and then, you show up. What do? I guess I'll do the race now. And I love your other one too of like, if I can walk, I'll walk. You're out there, you're signing up for a 162-kilometer race that has a time limit, and you're not saying like, I'm going to run everything I could possibly run. I'm going to do these times, 10-minute kilometers, whatever it is. You're just saying, if I can walk, I'm going to walk.
Yeah.
And that feels like such a small promise to make, but looking at it from the outside, it seems like that promise may have just been the thing that got you across the finish line.
I think it definitely helped, and to be reminded of it at some point during the event when you're feeling pretty low was a very handy thing to not have to remind myself. And I think going forward, it's huge. It's just a huge thing in my mind of being like, I showed up, I did what I said I was going to do, and it worked.
Hats off to your wife, Kat, for being such an incredible, part of your support network as well, and reminding you of like, hey, Mike, you can still walk, you can do this. Like, I believe in you. So, hats off to her. And I'm curious, we talked a little bit about journaling, about some of the low points we may have going through our sport or going through life. Do you do any kind of journaling practice or writing practice to kind of highlight some of those wins you've had or some of those hard things you have accomplished?
I tend not to highlight the wins.
Okay.
It's probably something I could work on. Like, I think there's always room for improvement on that side of things, and I'm still very, very new to it. I definitely have some goals in the future of kind of, if you call them dream board races, that I would love to compete in and finish. And so I definitely have in a book, I've got it all written down on what races they are and what races I need to do to get lottery tickets to try and enter those races. So one of them is the Hard Rock 100, which is in Colorado, and it would be just a spectacular race that's amazing scenery, and I'd love to do it. And it's so popular. They say you've got more chance of getting into Harvard than you do Hard Rock 100. But Whistler race gave me a lottery ticket, so it's like I have a chance.
That's fantastic,
not a huge chance, but I have a chance.
Yeah.
And so there's other races like Western States where you have to finish an event to get a lottery ticket for that. And so there's always something like that to can kind of work towards. And then I've got just a couple of personal ones that you don't necessarily need a lottery ticket for, but I just need to be a bit more mentally ready or in the right country to tackle some of those events.
Totally. And I love that process there of writing down, maybe these potentially far out challenging goals or challenging races you'd like to do, and then being what do I need to do to get that? So breaking down that task into, maybe some smaller, more manageable chunks.
Yeah, and it's also a really cool way to explore. So for example, like Hard Rock lottery ticket lasts 2 years. So it's like, cool, I don't have to focus on a Hard Rock lottery ticket next year, but in 2024 I've already eyed up a race that'll give me a lottery ticket, and it's a race that I want to do anyway. So it's kind of cool. It gives you steps to get there, and the whole process is really cool because you get to explore and you get to experience these new things the whole time, building up some more wisdom, some more experience. Like
Yeah.
just building that wall brick by brick.
Totally, and it's so cool to think about, those experiences being not just kind of physical experience, like I've run this far, I've run this fast, but also like, I've been out there on a race course for, what was it, 38 hours?
Yeah, 38:41.
And yeah, it's like it's putting in those mental reps as well, isn't it? Just building up that strength.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, if I ever go that far again to get to 33 kilometers and kind of know a little bit about what to expect, maybe going forward, you kind of like every day is going to be different. That's the one of the allures, I guess, to these 100-milers is it's not often you get to show up to an event not knowing if you can finish.
Yeah.
Whereas that's these things, like a lot of things have to go right for you to finish.
Yeah, so that's almost the trend. More often than not, you are showing up to these events not knowing if you can finish, right? And it takes a huge amount of courage to do that. Hats off to you. I, want to be respectful of your time here and start winding things down shortly, but I did want to touch just quickly. I know recently you've taken on a role as a run leader with a local business, North Shore Sports Medicine. And you're helping, spread all of these good ideas and this hard-earned wisdom that you've built up over the years with some people who are maybe newer to running or coming back from injury and building their running practice back up. And I wanted to ask you, if you could impart just one piece of wisdom on these runners, what would it be?
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah.
I think we have access to so much information now, and that's allowed me to create these ideas in my mind of the events that I would like to do. But that's not how it started. Like I didn't put on a pair of running shoes one day being like, cool, I'm going to run Tour de France in Italy, which is 330 kilometers and 24,000 meters of vertical gain. Like that's just kind of organically grown. And so these people who are starting their journey really or trying to get back onto the path, it's going to take time and just enjoy every step of the way. I let most of them know it's a really cool program. It's like a learn to run 5K or pick it up 5K, which is if you can already run and you want to do a little bit faster, and they do the same with a 10K. And so I get there and people sort of say to me, they're like, oh, well, I run, but nothing like you and the crazy long distances. And it's reminding them that 10 kilometers is a huge accomplishment. 5 kilometers is a huge accomplishment. Like I was leading the 10Ks this last week, and I was chatting to a guy, and he's like, oh, I know it's not special like what you do. And it's like, it is. We've sort of touched on it briefly, but like it's a crazy small percentage of the world that can run 10 kilometers or run a marathon.
It is physically able to run at all.
Yeah. And so we were chatting some numbers before the show, and it's like, what we say, even 70 million people could run 10K. I think that's probably a fair assessment.
Yeah, I know you had the percentage form there.
Yeah, that's one. So if you can
1% of the population.
So if you can run a 10K or probably even a 5K, you're in the top 1% of the world. And so when you kind of put it into that scope, it's like it shouldn't take away from anything. Just because of what I can do doesn't reflect anything on your journey, your experience, and the achievements that you're making, because they should be celebrated.
Totally. Yeah, you've got these people here that are learning to run 10Ks, comparing themselves to you as like this big idol way up here, like, oh, what you're doing is amazing. But what they're maybe not seeing is that you're then looking up to the pool of runners above you and like, oh man, I'm not special at all. So I think it just hones in that importance of, focusing on what you are doing, focusing on what is going well for you, and not getting caught up in like what you're not doing, what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. And I think the more that we can apply that outside of running or outside of biking and into our everyday lives, the kind of more content and more like the happier we'll be. I've certainly found that I'm trying to shift that into my real world, if you want to call it real world, outside of running. And I definitely have outside in the biking and the climbing world. Like I don't really care how long I've been doing it for or how good you are. I continue just to try and make improvements on my own skill, my own technique and practices there, and it's just enjoying it. Like finding enjoyment in those incremental steps, if you will. Like
Totally.
It doesn't have to be a huge leap. It doesn't have to be massive, even in your own mind. Like you can just celebrate those slight. Oh, I did that corner slightly better.
Totally.
It's like, enjoy it, celebrate it. It's awesome.
It's really important to celebrate it in whatever way works for you, whether it be sitting down, having a conversation like this after a ride, after a run, or whether it be kind of journaling and being like, all right, well, like, what is going well for me?
Yeah.
And that's not to say we won't think about or write about what we could do better next time. But definitely we want to highlight, like, well, what is going well? What am I doing well?
Yeah.
And I know, like, sometimes it can be hard if we've had maybe, a day out on the trails that, wasn't exactly what we were going for. But I guarantee you can always find something, whether it be like I showed up, I got outside, I got to look at some cool trees, like whatever it was, you can find something.
Well, that's, because my wife also runs, we'll often say that to each other, like, oh, how was your run this morning? And if one of us is like, not good, it's like, yeah, but you got out there, which is more than most people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's
that
the
simple
same
reframe to lift each other up.
It's the same on a bike. If someone's like, oh, I had a rough day, and it's like, oh, what trails did you do? And they're like, this fun, but I didn't ride this one at all well. And it's like, well, did you ride bobsled? Yeah. Cool, man.
Yeah.
There's people out there who can't ride that. You're amazing.
And like even if they walk down bobsled, it's like, cool, you get to have a walk in the forest today. That's awesome.
Just celebrating, like trying to find something good out of everything. And that was, I think, a big thing with dropping out of Sinister 7, that I had to find some good. And the good was my legs were ready and I knew how to prepare physically for the next one.
Totally.
Even though I wasn't able to do that, but I knew what steps I needed to take to get me to that level.
Yeah, so that low point led to this deep knowing and this deep trust that, like, I know what to do now to prepare for the next one. And guess what? It worked. You finished.
Yeah. You tend to learn a lot from failures.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you necessarily always focus on the negatives, but if you can focus on what you've learned and view that as a positive, then overall it's a positive experience. I look back on it rather fondly as a really cool, unique learning experience, because it was something that I got to experience that no one else did.
Yeah.
And very few people, I shouldn't say very few people, but yeah, very few people get to experience something like that, putting their absolutely everything into it, and then just the day wasn't your day. And living with it, being okay with it, trying to refocus for the next challenge that you decide to do for yourself.
It's a heavy experience, and it's so cool hearing you speak on it now and hearing, just how well you've unpacked that experience and really made it work for you.
Yeah, it's definitely finishing is nicer.
For sure, we all love winning. We all love finishing and achieving our goals. Yeah.
But yeah, moving forward was tough, but again, you just kind of build strength from that and draw experience from it.
So I think, it really highlights the importance of not being afraid to set ourselves challenging goals or go after things that we really want to do out of fear of failure. Almost embracing that journey of being like, cool, well, if I do meet this objective, if I do finish, if I do win the race, that's cool. But if I fail, that's cool as well, because I'm going to learn something out of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Well, I think that's a great place to leave this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man, for coming in and taking the time to sit down with me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I know, over our short time working together, I've learnt so much about mindset from having these conversations with you, and so much that I can apply in my own mountain biking. So thank you for being so open and sharing. I'm sure people will get a lot out of this as well.
Yeah, I hope people find something out of it, and even if it's just something small that they take with them for a while, it's really cool. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to, again, do something different, something unique that I've not done before, and just sit down and have a conversation without being interrupted by the phone ringing or something, which is what normally happens at work.
For sure, man. Well, this is awesome. I'm going to let you go here and get out and enjoy the trails.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you head out into the mountains. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or any particular episodes you enjoyed, and even about any guests you'd like to hear me have on the show at some stage in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very close to my heart, so I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. So thank you, dear listeners, for taking the time to listen. I'll see you on the next one.